Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we cut through the noise to get you informed fast. Today, we're taking a fascinating plunge into something absolutely critical, the evolving role of communication in the modern hotel and tourism industry. And we're putting a special lens on Greece. We've got a really interesting stack of sources for this deep dive. First up, there's a foundational article from 2010 by Fotis Pantopoulos. It really laid out the communication challenges hotels were facing, over a decade ago. Then we're going to fast forward. We've got a whole collection of recent news items from just this month, July 2025, detailing what's actually happening right now, the trends in Greek and European tourism. So our mission here, it's really to unpack how those core communication principles, the ones highlighted way back then, aren't just relevant today. Honestly, they might be even more urgent now. We're looking for those aha moments, right? The connections between those enduring insights and the real-time challenges and maybe opportunities that you see playing out in today's, well, very dynamic tourism landscape. Let's kick off with that foundational piece from 2010. Fotis Pantopoulos started by highlighting what he called the traditional Greek entrepreneurial approach to communication. He pointed out this initial misunderstanding where communication was often just lumped together with things like advertising or sales techniques, maybe public relations. He said it was basically put in an unclear space.
Yeah, and what's really insightful is how the article immediately pushes past that surface view. It argues that communication isn't just, the words you use or the pictures you show. It's much deeper. It's a whole set of behaviors and actions that an entity like a hotel uses to present itself. And it's constantly interacting with its environment. It goes way beyond just verbal stuff.
That distinction feels really important, actually. So if that was the understanding people were aiming for over a decade ago, why were so many businesses, especially the smaller ones maybe, so slow to really grab hold of this more, well, holistic view?
That's a great question. And Kantopoulos did touch on several reasons. Cost concerns were definitely mentioned, although he argues they shouldn't really be the main driver. But perhaps more significantly, he pointed to widespread ignorance, or maybe just indifference. He even suggested this might have stemmed from a period of, pretty good market stability, high occupancy rates, which, looking back, gave this kind of false sense of security. It led him to frame it as this really stark dilemma: communicate or die.
Wow, communicate or die. That's pretty blunt, but it definitely makes you sit up and listen. It sounds like even back then, the old ways just weren't enough. Let's dig into those limitations he talked about for advertising, marketing, and PR. Starting with advertising, what were its main weaknesses?
Well, one really striking point Pantopoulos made was that advertising by itself, even with new persuasive tricks, just wasn't cutting it anymore. It couldn't just rely on, simple claims or pretty pictures. He observed that the modern customer was already becoming more mature, more informed. They traveled, they knew things, they judged critically, and they really demanded the best quality to price ratio. And quality, as he pointed out, is subjective, right? So simple advertising just falls flat. Basically, his argument was that throwing big bucks at ad campaigns without a proper communication strategy underneath, it was just disproportionate to the results. A waste, really.
So less about the money spent and more about a lack of strategic thinking behind it. Got it. And what about marketing? You mentioned he said it was often too reliant on just a brand name.
Exactly. A strong brand helps, no doubt. But he warned it could easily fade if its public image wasn't actively managed. And that management, he really stressed this, includes everything: internal operations, leadership, the works. The whole profile of the business, as he put it, needs to convey strategy, expertise, organization, reliability, and crucially, a genuine interest in people and the environment. Without that broader picture, sales become much harder if they're just seen as transactions. It's about more than just selling a room, you see.
That's a really powerful idea, marketing needing to reflect the whole ethos of the place. Okay, and finally, public relations, PR. He suggested it often got lost in expensive stunts that highlighted staff abilities rather than the actual product or hotel experience.
Precisely. Pantopoulos emphasized that PR, while obviously close to communication techniques, its real job must be to project and maintain the business's overall image, both entrepreneurial and social. If it just becomes about showing off how clever the staff are, it completely misses the point of building and sustaining the company's reputation and ultimately trust.
Right. So the big message from 2010 seems crystal clear. Advertising, marketing, PR, they all fall short if they aren't working together, integrated into a really well thought out modern communication approach. This strategic communication needed to be understood and really implemented autonomously right within the hotel's operations. It sounds Well, quite revolutionary for its time, certainly in the Greek context he was describing. Okay, let's unpack this then. How do these, let's call them timeless communication challenges, actually play out in today's world, which is changing so fast? Let's look at those July 2025 news items. What are they telling us about the current landscape?
Right, these recent headlines paint a really vivid, almost overwhelming picture of today. But we can group them, I think, to make the connections clearer for you. First off, you see these immense operational and infrastructure challenges. I mean, think about European air transport facing yet another crisis strikes, staff shortages. That directly hits how a hotel communicates, right? Managing expectations about arrival delays. At the same time, the industry is pushing hard for sustainable aviation fuels, SAF. That shows a big strategic shift, a communication point in itself. And then you have local things, like the floating bridge in Lefkada closing, which is a real blow to maritime tourism there. But it's not all bad news. Piraeus Port Authority gets recognized. There are new bus routes helping ferry passengers, airport upgrades happening in places like Heraklion, even things like the U.S. finally dropping shoe checks at airports after 20 years. That changes the travel experience slightly.
So the basic stability of just getting there is still a massive communication point. Any hiccup immediately affects trust. It really brings back Pantopoulos's point about a business needing to present itself in constant interaction with its environment. How do hoteliers even begin to communicate effectively when the very systems they rely on are under such strain?
It really has to be about proactive, transparent communication, managing expectations, showing you're on top of it, showing resilience. It's tough. Then, shifting gears a bit, there's this huge theme around sustainability, regulation, and evolving tourism models. We're hearing calls from places like Paros for, quote, fair rules, sustainable solutions, and respect for the hotelier. That signals clear community pushback or concern. You've got a new ministerial decision on swimming pools that's apparently hitting businesses amidst the season, showing how regulations can just land mid-stride and cause chaos. And really fundamentally, there's an article asking point blank, why is the sun and sea dichotomy outdated?
That's a huge shift in perception, isn't it? If the old reliable sun and sea model is being questioned, hotels suddenly need to communicate a completely different kind of value. How are some places adapting? We're seeing examples.
We are, absolutely. Look at Santorini. They're actively promoting sustainable, authentic experiences with private tours instead of the old mass excursion model.
Yeah.
That's a direct communication shift. You also see things like a new postgraduate program focusing on sustainable tourism and culture. Kimolos being ranked globally for cleanest waters. That's not just an environmental badge, it's a powerful communication tool for attracting a certain kind of traveler. The whole conversation is moving, isn't it? From just showing a nice beach to demonstrating genuine community respect, environmental care, things like restoring the Cortalioti Gorge or fire readiness exercises in Mistras, it shows active stewardship.
Okay, that makes sense. What else is jumping out from the news?
Well, there's a definite surge in promotion, collaboration, and new investments. You've got countries like Greece and Italy signing tourism cooperation protocols. That's high-level strategic communication. The Greek National Tourism Organization, EOT, seems incredibly busy press trips for Balkan viewers, promoting specific regions like Pella and that EOT Netflix collaboration. Creating new video content for Greek tourism, that's a massive leap in promotional strategy. We're also seeing big international hotel brands moving in or expanding, like Wyndham Hotel coming to Athens, and major cultural wins, like the Minoan Palaces of Crete finally making the UNESCO World Heritage List. That's a huge promotional asset and requires careful communication from tourism bodies.
It sounds like the industry is really investing not just in bricks and mortar, but heavily in shaping its narrative, its story. The focus seems much sharper now on strategic, coordinated promotion. What about the other side of the coin, the consumer? What challenges are coming from there?
Yes, that brings us to challenges in evolving consumer behavior. Some of this is quite surprising, like research from EasyJet Holidays showing 9 million potential British tourists can't swim. That might actually influence destination choice, or at least how safety around water is communicated. And this is crucial. Consumers are apparently expressing real distrust in the travel industry when it comes to protection against AI fraud. That demands incredible transparency and effort in building digital trust. Then you have the economic pressures. The high cost of living is reportedly depriving the majority of Greeks of the right to holidays, which obviously impacts domestic tourism demand. And sometimes it's about behavior. There was that unpleasant story about tourism we do not want, with tourists stealing a large Greek flag. That's a communication challenge on a whole different cultural level. Plus, serious issues like the migration situation impacting places like Crete prompt urgent appeals from tourism bodies.
Wow, that's quite a spectrum. From fundamental trust issues online to economic hardship and even cultural clashes, it makes that point from 2010 about a business's profile needing to show genuine interest in people and the environment feel incredibly urgent now.
Absolutely. And there's more. Booking.com sees a positive 2025 for Europe, but flags problems for smaller places. There are warnings about U.S.-EU trade tensions hitting air transport, court decisions impacting cruise ship limits. Research showing Europeans are maybe seeking quieter spots now, changing priorities. And the sheer scale, 6.2 million people employed in European transport. The massive growth expected in travel tech hitting over $20 billion by 2032. And of course, the huge question mark over Google's AI mode and what that means for how businesses get found online. All these things just underscore how dynamic and complex the consumer landscape is. It demands really sophisticated, agile communication.
I'm genuinely struck by the sheer scale of all this change. It feels like the industry is, well, fighting on 20 different fronts at once sometimes. So let's bring it together. What does this all mean when we put those 2010 communication insights right alongside these very current, very real 2025 headlines? What's the big so what here for you?
Well, if we connect those dots, the picture becomes, I think, abundantly clear. That shift Pentopoulos was calling for from traditional to modern communication. It's not optional anymore. It's absolutely critical for survival, maybe even thriving. The complex challenges we see today, airline strikes, sudden regulations, the massive push for sustainability, worries about AI fraud, they all demand that truly dynamic approach he was talking about. That 2010 call for a dynamic corporate profile. It's amplified like crazy now. Hotels have to communicate how they're engaging with sustainability, how they respect local communities like we heard from Paros. They need to talk about their digital transformation, maybe using things like the new EU digital identity wallet for smoother interactions, and crucially, how they manage crises.
So the foundations he laid out are even more critical now.
Exactly. And remember his point about quality and value for money? That's now deeply tangled up with these changing traveler priorities we see in the news. People seeking quieter spots, questioning the old sun and sea formula. It means communication has to be much more sophisticated. It can't just be claims. It has to convey genuine, authentic experiences like those sustainable tours in Santorini are trying to do.
Right. And what about the personal touch he mentioned for sales?
That's reinforced too, isn't it? Especially with that consumer distrust around AI fraud. It means genuine human connection, transparent communication. They become even more vital. It's about building real trust, showing your values, having a dialogue, not just, shouting messages into the void.
It really is fascinating how that analysis from over a decade ago just perfectly sets the stage for understanding today's complexities. It feels like while the tools change, AI, digital wallets, Netflix collabs, and the specific challenges, shift strikes, regulations, sustainability demands, that core understanding remains. Communication has to be this holistic, interactive thing, deeply embedded in how a business operates, not just a separate department for marketing or PR. That seems to be the key to resilience and success in this incredibly competitive, fast-moving global tourism market.
Absolutely. The hotel, and really the whole tourism ecosystem,
Yeah.
needs to act like a conscious communicating entity. Its communication needs to be woven into its operations, its values. That's what builds real strength, real resilience in the face of all this change.
So here's something for you to think about. In a world where even those traditional sun and sea models are being questioned, what new, authentic narrative will you look for in your next travel experience? And how might your choices collectively shape the future of how tourism communicates globally?